Hinokami Chronicles 2 doesn't waste a second. The moment you load in, you're dropped right into the middle of some pretty intense action, which is a quick but potent reminder of exactly why you showed up in the first place. Now, to call a spade, I'm a pretty casual anime fan, maybe leaning a little closer to the core side. However, I really enjoy the Demon Slayer anime, and for what it's worth, I had a really good time with Hinokami Chronicles 1, even if it did feel a little bit bare bones in certain aspects. I was one of those people in the Steam reviews venting about how the first game never got any support past the Mugen Train arc, so if there was ever a perfect time for a sequel, it's right now, riding what seems to be the massive hype train up towards the Infinity Castle. Now, as you can probably tell from the footage, this game is absolutely gorgeous. Even from the first trailer, I could tell it was going to look and feel like a big step up. In the same way that the anime tightens up between the seasons, the game really follows that trend to a smashing degree. The animation feels sharper, it feels heavier, looks cleaner, and knows exactly what you've been waiting for. The first game definitely looked good, but there were moments in my time with Chronicles 2 where I almost forgot that I was playing and not just watching an episode from the anime, especially if you happen to look at the two side by side. Outside of the difference in the skin textures and some slight audio sync issues, you'd have a fairly hard time noticing which one is which. And it doesn't make it any easier to tell them apart when the camera work is so strong. And while this is the kind of thing that definitely depends on the scenes from the show, there's such a clear sense of following the source material to an absolute degree. In fact, I'd say even more so than the first time around. The developers did a real fantastic job in capturing the switch between the huge dramatic moments and the dumb, over-the-top comedy. Demon Slayer's always been good at the sudden mood swings, and the game carries that feeling and overall tone pretty well. Especially with Zenitsu when he's having his weird little meltdown moments, the face work is extremely uncanny. You can tell that the developers were having way too much fun with this, and it feels really good because there are quite a few anime games out there that are put together quite well and are very fun to play, but they don't capture the story moments quite like this one does. It feels very much like an anime with interactive fights and not so much like a game with cutscenes based off of an anime, which might seem like a little distinction, but in practice it's actually quite huge. And that goes beyond just the cutscenes as well. When you're exploring the world, the backgrounds aren't as static as they were in the original game. There's more movement, little details going on in the environment that should frankly be there. And it makes the world feel less like a stage set and more like an actual place that you're walking through, capturing your adventure. Now, not every environment feels that way, but for me it's a case of it's nice having some rather than having none at all. It's certainly a nice upgrade to the game's engine. Even when you're simply running around from point A to point B, there is something to find hidden away or something catching your eye over yonder. Maybe not everything is so captivating. Sometimes a hidden item is just a character quote and not the end-all be-all, but it's nice having something else going on in the background. Fighting in Chronicles 2 still feels as flashy as it did in the first entry, and mechanically it's almost the same game with minor changes, but nothing on the scale of what I actually expected from the sequel. I came into it thinking that I would see some level of upgrade to a point where going back to the first game might have been difficult, but there was not much change to the formula at all, which is fairly disappointing. Which results in the game having the same effect on me that Chronicles 1 had, where halfway through you're using so many of the same abilities that the lack of depth in the combat really starts to show. And then that's where you start to notice all the little cracks. In Chronicles 1, I was a bit more forgiving towards the basic execution as it was the first game in the series. However, with the sequel, that really should have been addressed. There should have been more done in the way of expansions on these base systems that really push the game forward and make it a different kind of beast. Now, the AI in the game still pretty much sucks. Not all the time, mind you, but it definitely gave me flashbacks to a few other fighting games of old. For a good chunk of the story, it does work perfectly fine, but around that midway point, the game starts trying to emulate difficulty by having enemies run away from you and in circles. Now, it's quite funny, but also very weird and very unsatisfying to see an Omega level demon just sprinting in circles purely to avoid your attacks. The boss fights, however, impress me quite a lot. They lean more into having mechanics to follow and avoidables to, well, avoid. And again, this depends completely on how the fights went in the anime, forcing you to dodge, react, and change your approach exactly how Tanjiro and Ko did. Those moments feel great, and they really sell the spectacle. I just wish there was a few more of them, because when the game commits to that kind of cinematic display during the fights, that's where Hinokami Chronicles 2 is at its best. It also makes it glaringly obvious that the mini-bosses you fight in the side quest have little to no mechanics at all, which shows a bit of a lack of design flair on the developer's side. That can be frustrating when you're doing the content, though luckily there's not too much stock in side content, so while it can be disappointing, it doesn't end up feeling like an overly big issue. And that's probably because there is a decent spread of content throughout the game. Story mode takes you through Tanjiro's adventure from the entertainment district right through to the end of the Hashira training arc. Versus mode is available for both online and offline play, with a roster of over 40-ish characters including all of your favourite Hashira and most of your favourite demons. The Path of the Demon Slayer acts as a playable recap of the game's first story. Training mode is here as you'd expect, and then there's Training Paths, which is a sleek roguelike mode where you train under one Hashira, face encounters that may or may not have special battle conditions, and work your way up to defeating that Hashira. It's a nice change of pace from everything else, and there's even a few mini-games scattered throughout to break things up. The gear system is a nice new addition that lets you equip items that you earn to give small perks during the story mode. We're talking things like giving you a heal when you drop below a certain health threshold, or a boost to your super gauge when you use a certain ability or swap a character out. It's a simple idea, but it adds a bit of variety in how you might tackle your fights, especially in the middle to late story mode. Now, one thing that does bug me out quite a bit is just how the story is presented at certain points. Most of the time it's handled with a fair amount of care, however, certain cutscenes get skipped and are added to the story menu as side cutscenes, which you can watch after completing the main missions. A few of these are just demon origin backstories, and it's not the end of the world if you miss them, but others are big moments like the upper rank demon meeting. It just feels really strange having to stop and dig them out separately instead of including them where they actually should have been in the story. Now, the sound work in the game is very strong, and the cast do an excellent job bringing the game to life. Some of the voice clips can get a bit much, lines do overlap, and the same line will most likely be spammed when you're picking up items, which seems like a huge testing oversight.
Okay. 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 Okay.
It also feels like certain characters only recorded one or two new lines and everything else from that particular character is just archival from the anime, which isn't a bad thing, but you know, it can be irksome when they're repeating the same line 4 to 6 times in a row. But overall, aside from that, this is definitely one of the better sound designs in anime games as far as I have played. Chronicles 2 feels like the fully realised vision of what the first game could have been. It's sharper, a bit more stylized, and they really lean into the narrative. Versus mode is where you'll probably spend a lot of your time once the story has wrapped, and it's genuinely a good time. The roster is plenty stacked, the matches are flashy, and it's very easy to pick up and play with friends. That said, there's no real stock in this being the next big competitive fighter. It's not about to have the same impact that Sparking Zero had for a while after its release, but that doesn't really matter here, because the attraction is pure fun. And as much as I really enjoyed Sparking Zero, Hinokami Chronicles 2 is much more of a sound experience from A to Z. Even if you're not an anime fan, you could still jump into this, follow along with the story mode, and still have a great time without missing the context. It's a game that knows exactly what it is, and it delivers on that in a way that the first game sort of fell short on. So if you're looking for just a bit of a fun time, nothing too serious, whether you're a fan of Demon Slayer or not, give this one a good honest crack. That's it from me today. If you had a good time, don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out. Thanks again for hanging out, and I'll catch you all in the Infinity Castle.
You think you've driven me into a corner with your little plan? But you're all on your way straight to hell! Mark my words, Demon Slayers. I'll massacre every last one of you before sunrise!
You're the only one going to hell, Muzan! You won't get away!